Maria Rodriguez was the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. At 28, she had already lived more life than most people twice her age. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise to get her younger brother ready for school. He was only 14 but battled a chronic illness that made everyday tasks exhausting for him and expensive for her. Between hospital bills and rent, Maria worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment running. But through it all, she never lost her smile or her quiet determination. By day, Maria cleaned offices in downtown skyscrapers, humming softly while mopping floors and wiping windows. By night, she worked as a waitress at fancy events, weddings, corporate galas, birthday bashes, the kind of parties where everyone wore suits and gowns, sipping champagne and laughing over things Maria couldn't relate to. Still, she didn't mind. The tips were good, and she liked meeting new people, even if they rarely noticed her beyond placing orders. What no one knew about Maria, though, was her secret. She loved to sing. Not the shower singing type either. This girl had pipes. Growing up, she'd won every school talent show and church choir competition. People used to tell her she should go professional, but real life got in the way. Bills don't pay themselves, and dreams can't feed a family. At least, not right away. So, singing stayed tucked away in the corners of her heart, something she did late at night when the world felt quiet enough to listen. One Friday afternoon, Maria got a call from her agency asking if she could cover a last-minute shift at a high-profile event. It wasn't unusual. These requests came often. But this time, the address stood out. It belonged to none other than Victor Langston, the billionaire businessman whose name was plastered across billboards and magazine covers. Everyone knew him. Sharp suits, sharper tongue, and a reputation for being both brilliant and intimidating. His parties were legendary, filled with celebrities, politicians, and entrepreneurs hoping to rub shoulders with power players. Maria hesitated. Working for someone like Victor sounded stressful, but the pay was too good to pass up. Plus, she figured it would be just another night of serving drinks and staying invisible. She grabbed her black uniform dress, pinned her hair back into a neat bun, and headed out the door, reminding herself to keep her head down and focus on work. When she arrived at the mansion, her jaw nearly dropped. The place looked like something out of a movie, with chandeliers dripping crystals, marble floors gleaming under soft lights, and waitstaff bustling around carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres. Guests mingled in designer outfits, laughing loudly and clinking glasses. Maria slipped into her role seamlessly, weaving between tables and offering refills with practiced ease. No one paid much attention to her, which was exactly how she liked it. But deep down, there was a tiny part of Maria that wondered what it would feel like to step into the spotlight, even for a moment. Little did she know, fate had plans to answer that question sooner than she expected. The party was in full swing, and Maria moved through the crowd like a ghost, present but unnoticed. She balanced trays of drinks with practiced ease, her movements smooth and efficient. The guests barely glanced at her as they laughed and chatted, their conversations blending into a low hum of privilege and power. Maria didn't mind being invisible. It made her job easier. But tonight, something felt different. There was an energy in the air, a tension that made her stomach tighten. At one point, Victor Langston himself stepped onto a small stage set up in the grand ballroom. He wasn't the kind of man who faded into the background. Tall, impeccably dressed, and radiating confidence, he commanded attention without even trying. As soon as he appeared, the room fell silent. Victor had a way of making people stop whatever they were doing just to see what he'd do next. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice deep and clear, carrying effortlessly across the space. "I hope you're enjoying yourselves. Now, I have a little surprise for you all." He paused, letting his words sink in. Maria froze mid-step, tray in hand, as she watched him scan the room. His gaze lingered on her for a split second, and her heart skipped a beat. "I've always believed that talent can be found anywhere," Victor continued, pacing slowly across the stage. even in the most unexpected places. Tonight, I want to put that theory to the test. He gestured toward the waitstaff scattered around the room. One of our servers has a hidden talent, something special, and I think it's time we heard it. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Hidden talent? What was he talking about? Before she could process his words, Victor turned directly to her. You, he said, pointing straight at her. Come here. For a moment, Maria thought she'd misheard him. Her face flushed hot, and she glanced around, hoping someone else would step forward. But no one did. All eyes were on her now, curious, amused, some even judgmental. She felt exposed, like a deer caught in headlights. Reluctantly, she sat down, her tray, and walked toward the stage, her legs trembling beneath her. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the base of the platform, Victor extended a hand to help her up. Up close, he seemed even more imposing, his presence overwhelming. Don't look so nervous, he said with a smirk, handing her a microphone. Let's hear what you've got. Sing something for us. Maria stared at the microphone in her hand, her mind racing. This wasn't part of the plan. She hadn't signed up for this. But looking out at the sea of expectant faces, she realized she had no choice. Refusing would mean losing her job, and maybe more. Swallowing hard, she nodded, though her hands shook as she gripped the mic. Victor leaned closer, his tone teasing, but firm. Don't disappoint me, he whispered, loud enough for only her to hear. Then he stepped back, leaving her alone under the spotlight. For a few agonizing seconds, the room was completely silent. Maria closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She thought about walking away, disappearing into the crowd, but deep down, she knew she couldn't. Not now. And then, as if by instinct, she remembered why she used to sing in the first place. It wasn't for applause or approval. It was because it made her feel alive. Opening her eyes, she took a deep breath and began to sing. The first note slipped out softly, almost hesitantly, like a bird testing its wings before taking flight. Maria's voice trembled at first, and for a brief moment, she thought she might crumble under the weight of all those eyes on her. But then, something shifted. As the second note left her lips, it carried a little more strength, a little more certainty. By the third, her voice had transformed entirely, rich, warm, and full of emotion, filling the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. The song she chose wasn't flashy or overly complicated. It was a classic ballad, one she'd sung countless times alone in her tiny apartment when no one was listening. It was the kind of song that told a story, one about heartbreak and hope, pain and perseverance. And as Maria poured herself into it, the words stopped being just lyrics. They became her own. Her voice rose and fell with raw honesty, each note carrying pieces of her struggles, her dreams, and the life she'd fought so hard to hold together. At first, the guests seemed unsure how to react. Some sipped their drinks casually, whispering, behind raised hands. Others tilted their heads, intrigued but not yet convinced. But as Maria continued, something remarkable happened. The chatter faded. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversations trailed off until the only sound in the room was her voice, weaving its way into the hearts of everyone present. Victor stood near the edge of the stage, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He wasn't smiling, but he also wasn't looking away. His sharp eyes stayed fixed on Maria, studying her every move. For someone who prided himself on staying in control, there was an undeniable flicker of surprise in his gaze. This wasn't what he'd expected when he called her up. He'd probably assumed she'd stumble through a shaky rendition of some pop hit, maybe even embarrass herself. Instead, she was doing the exact opposite, owning the stage in a way that made it impossible to look away. As the final chorus approached, Maria closed her eyes, letting the music take over completely. Her fear melted away, replaced by a quiet, confidence she hadn't felt in years. When the last note lingered in the air, the room erupted into applause. Not polite clapping either, the kind that comes from deep within, spontaneous and genuine. People cheered, whistled, and even stomped, their feet, their earlier skepticism replaced by awe. For Maria, the moment felt surreal. She opened her eyes, blinking against the bright lights, and looked out at the crowd. Faces that had once ignored her now beamed with admiration. Some people were standing, clapping enthusiastically, while others simply stared, clearly moved. Even the staff members stationed along the walls exchanged stunned glances, their expressions saying what Maria already knew. She had done something extraordinary. But the real shock came when she turned to face Victor. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by something softer, a mix of respect and curiosity. For a man who thrived on power and control, this rare display of vulnerability spoke volumes. Without saying a word, he stepped forward, took the microphone from her hand, and nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her triumph. Maria stepped back, her knees still weak, but her spirit soaring. In that moment, she realized something profound. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone capable of commanding a room, of making people feel something real. And though she didn't know it yet, this performance would change far more than just her evening. It would set her on a path she could never have imagined. After the applause died down and the guests returned to their conversations, Victor motioned for Maria to follow him. She hesitated, unsure of what was coming next. Was he going to scold her, congratulate her, or worse, act like nothing had happened at all? But something in his expression told her this wasn't over, not by a long shot. He led her to a quiet corner of the mansion, far from the noise of the party. The opulent decor of the room they entered felt almost suffocating compared to the simplicity of Maria's own life. Plush velvet chairs, gold accents, and a grand piano sitting silently in the center. Victor gestured for her to sit, but she stayed standing, clutching the microphone in her hand, like it might vanish if she let go. "So," Victor began, his tone measured but direct. "That was unexpected." Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't plan it," she stammered. "You asked me to sing, so I didn't ask you to blow everyone away," he interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Where did that come from?" For a moment, Maria didn't know what to say. How could she explain years of late-night practice sessions, of singing while washing dishes or folding laundry? How could she put into words the way music made her feel alive, when everything else seemed so heavy? Instead, she shrugged. "It's just something I've always done. It helps me cope, I guess." Victor studied her for a beat longer, then nodded slowly. "Well, it's clear you're wasted here," he said bluntly. "Why are you serving tables instead of doing this full-time?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. Why was she wasting her talent? Because she had bills to pay. Because dreams didn't feed her brother's medicine. Because life hadn't given her a choice, or at least that's what she'd told herself. But now, faced with Victor's piercing gaze, those excuses felt flimsy, almost insulting. "I have responsibilities," she said finally, her voice quieter than before. "My brother, he's sick. I can't just drop everything to chase something that might not work out." Victor leaned back against the piano, crossing his arms. "Responsibilities don't disappear, no matter what path you choose," he replied. "But neither does talent. You think I got where I am today without taking risks, without making sacrifices?" Maria frowned. "This isn't about you. My situation is different." "Is it?" he challenged. "Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy. In fact, it'll probably be harder than anything you've ever done. But if you're serious about this, if you really believe you have something to offer, I can help. I'll fund your career, lessons, auditions, connections, you name it, but only if you're willing to put in the work." Maria stared at him, her mind racing. This was insane. A billionaire offering to bankroll her dream? It sounded too good to be true, and yet there was no mistaking the seriousness in his voice. He wasn't joking, and he certainly wasn't doing this out of kindness. There was a sharpness to his words, a challenge lurking beneath the surface. "What's the catch?" she asked cautiously. "No catch," he said with a smirk. "Just results. If you're not ready to give this your all, walk away now. But if you are," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Maria swallowed hard. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for, even if she hadn't realized it until now. The chance to step out of the shadows and into the light. But it came, with strings attached, and she knew Victor wouldn't tolerate failure. Still, as she looked down at the microphone in her hands, she felt a spark of defiance ignite within her. "I'm ready," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. "Whatever it takes." Victor's smirk widened into something resembling approval. "Good," he said, "because we start tomorrow." The next few months were a whirlwind, exhilarating, exhausting, and overwhelming all at once. Maria's days blurred together as she juggled her new responsibilities with Victor's relentless schedule. He wasted no time throwing her into the deep end, setting up vocal lessons with top coaches, arranging studio sessions, and booking auditions that left her nerves frayed. It wasn't just about singing anymore. It was about learning how to carry herself, how to speak confidently in interviews, and even how to dress for industry events. Every detail mattered, and Victor made sure she understood that. At first, Maria struggled to keep up. The vocal coaches pushed her harder than she'd ever been pushed before, pointing out flaws she didn't know she had. "You're good," one of them said after a particularly grueling session. "But good isn't enough in this world. You need to be unforgettable." Those words stuck with her, echoing in her mind long after the lesson ended. She practiced until her throat hurt, replaying recordings of herself to catch every imperfection. Some nights, she cried in frustration, wondering if she'd made a mistake accepting Victor's offer. But then there were moments when everything clicked, the kind where her voice soared effortlessly, leaving both her and her coach speechless. Those small victories kept her going, fueling her determination to prove she belonged in this world. Slowly but surely, she began to see progress. Her confidence grew, not just in her singing, but in herself. For the first time in years, she started believing she could actually do this. Victor, however, wasn't exactly the supportive mentor figure Maria had hoped for. His methods were brutal, bordering on cruel at times. During rehearsals, he'd interrupt her mid-song to critique her tone or posture, his sharp comments cutting deeper than she cared to admit. "You're holding back," he snapped once during a particularly tense session. "Stop playing it safe. If you want people to care, you have to give them something real." His words stung, but they also forced her to dig deeper. Maria realized he wasn't trying to break her. He was pushing her to find the raw, unfiltered emotion that made her performance at his party so unforgettable. Still, his intensity wore her down. There were days when she questioned whether she could handle his demands, let alone succeed in an industry known for chewing people up and spitting them out. Despite the pressure, Maria refused to back down. She poured her heart into every audition, every rehearsal, every late-night practice session. And slowly, things began to shift. A local cafe owner heard her sing during a casual gig and invited her to perform regularly. Word spread, and soon she was getting offers to sing at bigger venues. People started recognizing her name, or at least her voice. It wasn't fame yet, but it was a start. Through it all, Maria noticed subtle changes in Victor too. While he still pushed her relentlessly, there were moments when his guard dropped. Once, after a tough day, he handed her a cup of tea and said, "You're stronger than you think." Another time, when she nailed a difficult audition, he gave her a rare smile, a genuine one, not the smug smirk she was used to seeing. These glimpses of humanity reminded her that behind his tough exterior, Victor was invested in her success, even if his way of showing it was unconventional. By the end of those months, Maria wasn't the same person who'd stood trembling on Victor's stage. She'd grown tougher, more resilient, and more self-assured. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, She felt ready to face whatever came her way. Just as Maria began to gain momentum, life decided to throw her another curveball. One morning, while scrolling through social media during a rare break, she stumbled upon a headline that made her stomach drop. Billionaire's pet project. Waitress turned singer sparks controversy. Her heart sank as she clicked on the article, only to find a tabloid story filled with half-truths and outright lies. The piece claimed Victor had handpicked her not because of her talent, but because of some secret favor she'd supposedly done for him. Worse still, it painted her as nothing more than a pawn in his game, implying she was riding his coattails to fame. The comments section was a minefield of negativity. Some called her unqualified, others accused her of using her looks to get ahead, and a few even questioned whether she'd genuinely sung at Victor's party or if it had been lip-synced. Maria stared at the screen, feeling like someone had punched her in the gut. All her hard work, all those sleepless nights practicing and pushing herself, it felt like it was being erased in an instant by people who didn't know her at all. When Victor found out about the scandal, he called her into his office immediately. Maria walked in bracing herself for criticism, assuming he'd be furious over the bad press. But instead, he surprised her. Sitting behind his massive desk, he looked unusually calm, almost contemplative. "This is my fault," he said without preamble. "I shouldn't have put you in this position. I thought throwing money and connections your way would help, but I didn't think about how it might look to everyone else." Maria blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I set you up," he admitted, leaning forward. "People see me backing you, and they assume you're here because of me, not because of your talent. And now this garbage is dragging your name through the mud." For a moment, Maria didn't know what to say. She'd spent months resenting Victor's harshness, his constant pressure, and his refusal to sugarcoat anything. But hearing him take responsibility like this, seeing vulnerability in a man who always seemed untouchable, caught her off guard. "It's not just you," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I knew going into this that people would talk. That's part of the deal, right? But I never wanted to rely on you or anyone to make it happen for me. I want to stand on my own." Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you did," he said. "You don't need me anymore. You've proven you can hold your own. If anything, I've become a distraction, a liability." Maria felt a lump rise in her throat. For all his flaws, Victor had given her opportunities she could never have dreamed of. He'd believed in her when no one else did, even if his methods were tough to swallow. Walking away from him felt like closing a chapter she wasn't ready to let go of yet. But deep down, she knew he was right. This was her journey, not his. If she wanted to silence the doubters, if she wanted to prove she deserved every bit of success coming her way, she had to do it herself. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. Victor leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. "Now, you fight back. Release your music independently. Show them why you belong here. Not because I say so, but because you say so." Maria left his office that day with a mix of emotions swirling inside her: fear, determination, gratitude, and a flicker of excitement. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. She was done letting other people define her story. It was time to write her own ending. Maria threw herself into creating her debut album with everything she had. This wasn't just music. It was her life, her truth, her way of fighting back against the doubters and proving that she belonged in this world. Every song she wrote came from a place deep inside her. The struggles of growing up poor, the weight of caring for her brother, the nights spent dreaming under flickering apartment lights. She poured all of it into her lyrics, letting her voice carry emotions words alone couldn't express. Recording the album wasn't easy. Without Victor's funding, Maria had to scrape together savings, borrow equipment, and rely on favors from friends in the industry who believed in her talent. Late nights became her norm again, but this time They weren't about serving tables or meeting someone else's demands. They were for her own dream. She worked tirelessly, determined to make every note count. When the album finally released, Maria held her breath, unsure how people would react. Would they see past the tabloid headlines? Would they hear the honesty in her songs? The first few days were nerve-wracking. Sales were slow, reviews trickled in, and social media buzzed with mixed reactions. But then something shifted. One listener posted a heartfelt message online, saying Maria's music had helped them through a tough time. Another shared how her lyrics resonated with their own struggles. Slowly, word spread. Listeners connected with her vulnerability, her authenticity. Her songs started climbing charts, earning radio play, and even catching the attention of critics who praised her raw talent. Victor kept his distance during this time, respecting her decision to go independent. But he still followed her progress, quietly, occasionally sending short, encouraging texts like, "You're doing great," or "Keep going." Though their relationship had changed, there was an unspoken bond between them now, one built on mutual respect and shared growth. As Maria's career took off, she used her platform to speak out about the challenges faced by artists starting out with nothing but passion. She talked openly about her journey, from working as a waitress to standing on stage, and urged others not to let fear or criticism stop them from chasing their dreams. Her story inspired countless fans who saw themselves in her resilience. Months later, Maria stood backstage at her first sold-out concert, clutching the microphone she'd once trembled to hold. The crowd outside roared, chanting her name, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. She thought about the long road behind her, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the moments when giving up felt easier than pushing forward. But most of all, she thought about the little girl who used to sing alone in her room, hoping someone might one day listen. When she stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Spotlight shining down on her, Maria smiled. Not because she'd made it, but because she knew she'd earned it. As she began to sing, her voice soared, clear and powerful, filling the arena with the same magic that had captivated Victor's party months earlier. Only this time, she wasn't singing to prove herself to anyone. She was singing because it was who she was, a woman who refused to be silenced, a fighter who turned pain into art, a dreamer who dared to believe in herself when no one else did. And, as the final notes faded into the night, Maria realized something profound. She hadn't just shocked a millionaire that fateful evening. She'd transformed her entire life, and maybe, just maybe, inspired others to do the same. Artifacts.